Question. Kim, can a person choose this path, to leave this whole game and dissolve in the source of creation, to stop being an individual, to achieve nirvana? Well, it's difficult to answer the question the way it's formulated, because it seems to me that the person is using certain terms differently than I would do. So I think we need to just clarify a couple of things. Can a person choose this path, to leave this whole game and dissolve in the source of creation? And the answer to that would, based on my understanding, be no. You can't choose not to exist. And as I explained in my video about how the world was created, you are an extension of the being of our Creator. In other words, we are living in a specific world of form here. This world was created originally by one being, our Creator. And we are all extensions of the Creator's being. We have awareness and self-awareness because we are out of the Creator's being. And this is the Creator's gift to us. And I know there are some people that will say, well, but the Creator then forced me to exist. And yeah, that's very true. The Creator created you. And obviously the Creator didn't ask you ahead of time, do you want to be created? But how could it? You weren't there. There was nothing to ask. So think about it logically. The Creator didn't really force us to come into existence. Where's the force? I mean, and then the other thing is that it's kind of like, can I leave this whole game and dissolve in the source? Well, this I've encountered this so many times over the many years I've been on the spiritual path. There are people who, it's like they don't want to exist. They don't want to be conscious. But the reason for this is that they are suffering. And as I explain in many of my videos, including How the World Was Created, we are suffering because we've gone into this state of consciousness that I call the consciousness of separation, where we use the duality consciousness to create a worldview. And that, in duality, there are always two opposite polarities. And when you choose one polarity, the further you go out towards that polarity, the more you create a pull or an opposition from the opposite polarity. So you are always pulled in two different directions in duality, and that's what causes people to suffer. Because life becomes so intense, their own minds become so intense that some people get to a point where they can't stand it anymore. But as I explained in my video about how the world was created, we weren't created in duality. We were created with a point-like sense of self, and we have the potential to expand it all the way to the Creator consciousness, so we can reach the same level of consciousness as our Creator. And this is an incredible gift. This is an incredible opportunity. It's just that because of the nature of free will, as I also explained, we can go into duality, and in duality we suffer, and therefore it can seem like, oh, this isn't a gift at all, this is a curse, like the famous saying. It's not a blessing, it's a curse. And I understand that people can feel this way, but I'm just saying, when you step back a little bit from your own self-focused state of mind and gain a deep understanding, you realize that it is actually an opportunity and a gift. Because, as I also explained in many of my videos, what causes the suffering is the ego or these subconscious selves. And you created them, and that means you can uncreate them. You can uncreate them. Now, you can, when you reach the Creator consciousness, you can go into the allness, and there you have different options. But as long as you are in a world of form that's evolving, you can't choose not to exist. You just can't. And it's also, I think, necessary in this context as the person is asking. Can you stop being an individual? No, you can't. But you can stop being the individual you are right now, the individual that's suffering. Because, as I've explained, you have a higher self called your I Am Presence, which is really where your individuality is anchored. But, for reasons I explained in my video about how the world was created, it's not your I Am Presence that takes embodiment in an undescended sphere. The I Am Presence sends an extension of itself, which I call the conscious you. And the conscious you is neutral awareness, pure awareness. It really doesn't have an outer personality. Your outer personality, which is what causes you to suffer, is created by the conscious you in order to take embodiment. So there's a part of your personality that isn't causing you suffering, because it's just related to what it's like to be in a physical body on a planet like Earth. But what causes the suffering is that at some point the conscious you decided to go into this state of separation and duality. And that's what causes the suffering. So by following the spiritual path that has been outlined for thousands of years, you can overcome that dualistic, separate sense of identity. You can stop being a separate individual, yes. And then you're actually reborn into a sense of identity as a connected being, and you can, as I said, work your way up to higher levels of consciousness until you can ascend from Earth, and then the conscious you reunites with the I Am Presence. And so you can say, yes, you can stop being a separate individual. You can, even when you come to see yourself as a connected individual, you can reach higher and higher states of connection until you unite with the I Am Presence, and then even the conscious you stops being an individual as such. But you are still the individual defined in the I Am Presence. You are still that individuality. And that's what I'm saying, that you can't give up until you reach the greater consciousness. But why would you want to give it up? Because it's only the separate self that sees this as a burden. So you see, what I've said in many of my videos is, the conscious you is not suffering. No matter what state of consciousness you're in right now, your conscious self is not suffering. The suffering takes place in these subconscious selves, which is like a perception filter you put on. You put on colored glasses, and now the world looks like a big threatening negative thing. But the conscious you has the ability to step outside of this, which is what has been called a mystical experience for thousands of years. And when you experience this neutral, pure awareness, you also see that you are not suffering. You are not that outer self. You are not the outer personality. So from that perspective, yes, you can leave the game, because the game is created in duality. So I have a whole playlist called Ego Dramas, also Ego Illusions and Ego Games. And if you watch those videos, you'll see that the ego has created all of these games that people are playing. And for some people, their whole lives are eaten up by playing one of these ego games. And yes, you can quit that. That you can quit. And then you are not suffering anymore. So all of a sudden, if you're not suffering, what's the big deal about you existing? So then the final part of the question is to achieve nirvana. And that's where the teachings that I'm giving, nirvana doesn't mean the dissolution of self. It means the ascension, where the conscious you reunites with the I Am Presence. It doesn't mean that you dissolve and there's nothing there. So I know there are different Buddhist sects that have different interpretations of nirvana, or nibbana as some pronounce it. But I'm not really an expert on the different Buddhist sects. I just know that that for some it means the dissolution of all sense of self, but you ask yourself a simple question. It's said that the Buddha went into nirvana, but then he came back out to teach. So if the Buddha had completely dissolved by going into nirvana, what was there that could decide, oh, I'm going to come back out and teach?